He raised her clan's sword to protect her, not knowing it made him her husband. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The storm hit like a wall of burning sand, a roaring sheet of static and red grit slamming against Elias Ward's visor as he pushed through the narrow canyon. His rescue scanner flickered, stuttered, then spat out a single fading pulse of life ahead. Weak, irregular, almost gone. He tightened his grip on the handheld beacon, its metal warm under his gloves. One more step, one more breath. The wind screamed around him, and sparks crackled along the canyon walls as the charged dust scraped the rock like knives. He could taste metal in the air, even through the respirator. Somewhere ahead, someone was dying. Elias forced himself forward, boots sinking into drifts of red powder fine as flour. His suit hissed tiny corrections from the cracked air seals around his shoulders. Not ideal, but stopping wasn't an option. A faint sound rose through the storm, metal scraping stone, a choked breath, then a sharp cry swallowed by the wind. Elias broke into a run. Lightning arced in thin, red strands across the sky, illuminating the figures ahead just long enough for him to see her collapse. A towering woman, skin a deep metallic blue, armor cracked and dented, dropped to one knee. Clutching a blade snapped nearly in half. Three shapes circled her, their armor bristling with hooked weapons that glowed faintly in the storm's charged air. Hunters. Not human. Not friendly. The tallest raised his spear, shouting something guttural and cruel, the tip sparking as he prepared to strike. Elias didn't think. He didn't plan. He just moved. He lunged forward, boots sliding in the sand as he dove for the object lying half-buried near the woman's hand, a long, dark blade with glowing red veins pulsing like a heartbeat. The moment his fingers closed around the hilt, the storm seemed to hold its breath. The hunters froze. All three stared at him with a shock so intense it cut through the storm's roar. The woman's eyes, silver, sharp, fever-bright, snapped open at the sight. Her voice cracked as she whispered, barely audible through the wind. Human? No. You must not. The closest hunter staggered back as if Elias had ripped the sun out of the sky. He lifted the Clanblade. The hunter rasped. Before witnesses. Another hissed. It cannot be undone. The vow is sealed. Elias blinked through the grit hammering his visor. I don't know what you think I just did, he said, raising the blade in what he hoped was a warning stance. But I'm not letting any of you kill her. The hunters exchanged glances. One spat into the sand, then snarled with a mix of disgust and grim acceptance. So be it. Protect your mate, human. Elias barely processed the word mate before the first attacker charged. Instinct took over. He swung the blade. It hummed in his hands, alive, vibrating with a heat that climbed up his arms. Sparks exploded on impact. The hunter reeled back, shocked that a human could wield such a weapon without being burned alive. Elias didn't feel heat. Only purpose. Only adrenaline. Only the knowledge that this woman, whoever she was, needed him standing. When the second hunter lunged, Elias pivoted, driven more by reflex than training, blades singing through the charged air. The third hesitated, eyes narrowing at the strange human who swung the sacred Clanblade, as if born to it. Then, with a snarl of frustration, all three retreated into the storm, vanishing between sheets of red lightning. The canyon fell eerily silent except for the rasp of Elias's breathing. He lowered the blade carefully, sand sliding off its surface like ash. The woman lay slumped in the dust, watching him with a look he didn't understand. Fear, anger, awe, and something like disbelief all tangled together. When she finally spoke, her voice was a low, broken whisper that seemed to vibrate inside the storm itself. Human, you just bound your life to mine. Elias blinked at her. I did what? Her gaze locked onto the blade in his hand. By raising my clan's sword. You have claimed me as your battle wife. Her breathing trembled. Whether you know the vow or not, you are mine now. Elias stared at her, the storm raging around them, the Clanblade pulsing in his grip like a Second heartbeat, completely unaware that he had just sealed a marriage in a culture he didn't understand and couldn't escape. The storm still howled, swirling around them like an angry beast, but Elias Ward couldn't hear it anymore. He was standing at the edge of the cliff, the Clanblade heavy in his hands, staring down at the woman who had somehow become his responsibility. The pulsating red energy from the blade seemed to echo his racing heartbeat. He hadn't asked for this. None of this was his choice, but somehow, now that it was done, he couldn't bring himself to drop the weapon. The wind cut through his suit, and the stinging dust scraped against his skin, but he barely noticed. Kaela was still kneeling in the sand, her chest rising and falling with each strained breath, and the strange bond that had been formed between them hung thick in the air like smoke. "You're not my husband," she said through clenched teeth, her voice rough from the storm and the injury. This was a mistake. Elias felt a cold shiver run down his spine. "I didn't," his words faltered, uncertain. "I didn't know. I'm just here to help." She looked up at him, eyes flashing with a mixture of confusion and something else he couldn't place. "Help." Her laugh was bitter, yet it softened when she looked at the Clanblade in his hands. "You think it's that simple?" Elias stood, frozen. "What does it mean? This vow, this marriage thing?" She sighed, her shoulders sagging with the weight of unspoken history. "The Clanblade is not just a weapon. It's a symbol of protection, of life, and when a warrior raises it in battle for another, it binds them together in a vow. A vow of life, Elias Ward. You chose to protect me, and by doing so, you chose me, and I you." The words were like a slap, yet they also carried an undeniable weight. It was more than just a fight. It was a commitment he couldn't back away from. He lowered the Clanblade, his fingers still gripping it tightly. "I didn't ask for this. I never intended for any of this." Kaela pushed herself to her feet, stumbling slightly, but finding her balance. "None of us do," she muttered under her breath, more to herself than to him. "But now that it's done, we have to deal with it." The sky above them crackled with energy as the storm raged on. Elias glanced around, his mind racing. They were alone on this remote planet, surrounded by nothing but the desert and the storm. No one was coming to help. "So what now?" he asked, his voice a mix of frustration and confusion. "Now, we survive," Kaela said, standing straighter, her posture shifting from one of weakness to one of quiet strength. She glanced at him, the coldness in her eyes slowly fading, replaced by a hesitant trust. "But you need to understand, human," she continued, her voice firmer now. "This vow, this bond, will change everything. You can't just walk away." He looked at her, then at the Clanblade still in his hand. "I didn't want any of this," he repeated, his voice quieter this time. But there was no mistaking the determination in his eyes. Kaela stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "And yet, here we are." The words hung between them like the storm overhead, unspoken, but understood. "I don't know what happens next," Elias admitted, his voice low. "But I'm not leaving you out here." Kaela studied him for a long moment before giving a small, almost imperceptible nod. "That's more than most would do." They both turned as a distant rumble echoed through the canyon. The storm wasn't going to let up any time soon. They had no choice but to press forward. With no other options, Elias helped Kaela steady herself, his arm around her waist as they began to move toward the shelter of a nearby cave. The storm would continue to rage, but there was a strange peace in knowing that, for now, they had each other. They didn't have answers. They didn't know what the future held. But as the storm howled around them, they had something more important, a bond forged in the chaos, and a shared determination to survive. As they disappeared into the darkness of the cave, the Clanblade, still glowing faintly in Elias's hand, was a reminder of the vow that now tied their fates together. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. The cave was silent except for the sound of Elias's boots crunching on the rocky floor, his breath heavy from the storm they had just escaped. Kaela walked beside him, her posture still tense but steadier now, the weight of the Clanblade on his back, a constant reminder of the vow he had unwittingly taken. The storm outside raged on, but inside the cave, there was an eerie calm, the kind that came with uncertainty, yet also with the relief of temporary safety. "We're not safe here for long," Kaela spoke, her voice a low murmur as she glanced toward the entrance, her eyes narrowing in thought. The hunters will come for us. They will track the Clanblade's energy signature. Elias didn't respond immediately, his mind still processing everything. A few hours ago, he had been a simple rescue worker on a mission to save lives. Now he was bound by an alien warrior's vow, caught in a storm with a woman he barely knew. It didn't make sense. It didn't feel real. I didn't ask for this, he finally said, his voice thick with frustration. I didn't choose this. Kaela stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. None of us choose our fate, she said, her words sharp but not unkind. But once you make a choice, once you take the sword, you are bound to it. Your fate is tied to mine now. You chose to save me, and that choice is not just a choice anymore. It's a vow. Elias swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. The Clanblade on his back felt heavier now, a symbol of something far greater than he had ever anticipated. He had been trained to rescue people, to save lives, but not to become part of their lives, not to make a vow that would change everything. What does it mean? Elias asked quietly. What does this vow really mean? Kaela exhaled slowly, a faint smile tugging at her lips, though it didn't reach her eyes. It means protection, she said. It means loyalty. It means you are bound to me and my clan. When you raised the Clanblade, you swore to fight for us, to stand beside us, no matter the cost. Elias didn't know what to say. This was more than he had bargained for, more than he could comprehend. And if I refuse? He asked, though he knew the answer. Kaela's eyes flashed dangerously, a spark of something fierce there. Refuse? She repeated, almost amused. Refuse to honor your vow? Do you think that's a choice you still have? Elias flinched, but her words were the truth. He had made a decision, even if he hadn't fully realized it at the time. I didn't know what I was doing, Elias muttered, more to himself than to her. I didn't know it meant this. Kaela stepped closer, her gaze piercing, her voice soft but firm. You didn't have to know, Elias. It's not about knowing. It's about doing. She paused for a moment, then added, and now you must live with it. Elias looked at her, his mind racing. The weight of the Clanblade on his back was a constant pressure, but Kaela's words were even heavier. He had made a choice, even if it was by accident. He had sworn an oath to protect her, to fight by her side. And now, whether he was ready for it or not, he was bound by that vow. They stood there in the cave, a heavy silence between them, the storm outside a distant reminder of the dangers still lurking. Elias wasn't sure what came next. He wasn't sure if he was ready for the challenges ahead. But as he looked at Kaela, he knew one thing for certain. There was no going back. He had made a choice. He had chosen to protect her. And now, they would face whatever came next together. The first step had been taken. And though the road ahead was uncertain, Elias felt a strange sense of resolve settle in his chest. He wasn't alone anymore. And that, for better or worse, was the reality he had to live with. The days passed slowly as Elias and Kaela adapted to their new reality. The storm had finally subsided, but the tension between them lingered in the cave like a shadow. Elias had tried to ignore the weight of the Clanblade on his back, but it was impossible. Every movement, every glance toward Kaela reminded him of the vow he had taken, whether he had truly meant to or not. It wasn't just a weapon. It wasn't just a symbol of honor. It was a binding force, an unspoken promise that had bound them together in a way neither of them had expected. They had spent the last few days in the cave, resting and strategizing. Kaela had shared stories of her clan, the VYR, and their warrior code. She spoke of the honor in the Clanblade, the sacrifices it represented, and the burden it carried. To her people, the Clanblade wasn't just an heirloom, it was a legacy that had now been transferred to Elias, whether he liked it or not. You don't understand, do you? Kaela asked one night as they sat by a small fire in the center of the cave. Elias was still grappling with the reality of their situation, his mind racing with 1,000 questions. I understand enough to know that I'm not the man I was before, he replied, his voice thick with frustration. But I don't understand why this has to happen to me. Why this? He gestured toward the Clanblade. Why this bond? Kaela stared at the fire for a long moment before responding. It's not about you, Elias, she said quietly, her voice tinged with something he couldn't quite place. It's about us. You've bound yourself to my clan now. Whether you accept it or not, you are part of us. And whether you like it or not, we are part of you. Elias ran a hand through his hair, trying to make sense of her words. The fire crackled, casting long shadows on the walls of the cave. "I never asked for this," he muttered. "I didn't ask for any of it." Kaela turned toward him, her eyes locking with his. There was no anger in her gaze, just a deep, unyielding understanding. "No one asks for it," she said softly. "But once the sword is raised, there's no going back. Once the vow is made, there's no undoing it." Elias felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders like a boulder. He had made a choice, whether he knew it or not. He had chosen to protect her, to stand by her side. And now he couldn't walk away from that. Not now. Not after what had already happened. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Kaela didn't immediately answer. She stood up, walking toward the entrance of the cave. Elias watched her move, her lithe frame silhouetted against the fading light of the day. The desert outside had begun to cool, but the air still felt heavy with the heat of the storm. "We move forward," she said, her voice carrying back to him. "The hunters will be looking for us. The VYR will come for me, and we will fight. Together." Elias's heart raced at her words, but he didn't flinch. This was his reality now. This was what he had bound himself to. And somehow, despite the fear that gnawed at his gut, he found himself ready. He stood up slowly, his hand resting on the hilt of the Clanblade, the weight of it both familiar and foreign. "Then we fight," he said, his voice steady. Kaela turned toward him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Yes," she said, her voice a quiet promise. "We fight." The decision was made. They were no longer just two individuals caught in a storm. They were a team, bound together by a vow neither of them had chosen, but both would now honor. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Elias Ward had chosen his path, and he was ready to face whatever came next by Kaela's side. The Clanblade hummed softly at his side, as if it knew the road ahead would be long, but it was a road they would walk together. The next few days passed in a blur of tension and preparation. Elias and Kaela moved cautiously through the desert, avoiding the main paths as best they could, knowing that the hunters would be close behind. The Clanblade, still slung across Elias's back, seemed to weigh heavier with each passing hour. They had no time to waste. Kaela was determined to reach the hidden stronghold of her people, a place where they could regroup and prepare for the coming confrontation. As they traveled, Elias began to see her in a new light. She was no longer just a warrior in need of saving, but someone who carried the weight of an entire clan on her shoulders. The storm had stripped away any illusions of safety, leaving them exposed to the harshness of the world around them. Kaela's resolve was unshaken, but Elias could see the strain beneath her calm exterior. One evening, as they sat around a small fire, Kaela spoke quietly, her gaze distant as if lost in thought. "The VYR are more than just warriors," she said, breaking the silence. "We are a people bound by tradition, by duty, by honor. The Clanblade is not just a weapon, it is a symbol of all that we stand for. And now, you carry it." Elias nodded slowly, trying to understand. He had heard bits and pieces of Kaela's stories, but this was different. There was a deep sadness in her voice, a heaviness that seemed to hang in the air. "I didn't ask for this," he said softly. "I didn't ask to become part of your people, part of this tradition." Kaela turned to face him, her eyes softening for a moment. "No one does," she replied, her voice carrying the weight of years of sacrifice. "But once you are chosen, once you make the vow, it is a bond that cannot be broken." Elias glanced at the Clanblade, still resting at his side. The weight of it was more than just physical. It was a constant reminder of the promise he had made, and the responsibility he now carried. "What if I'm not the right person for this?" he asked quietly. "What if I can't live up to what it means to carry that blade?" Kaela's gaze was steady, unflinching. "It is not about being the right person," she said. "It is about standing by your word, standing by those you swore to protect. It is about doing what must be done, even when it seems impossible." Elias sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. His mind was a whirlwind of doubt and uncertainty, but Kaela's words had an undeniable weight to them. She was right. He had made a choice, whether he had known it or not. And now, there was no turning back. The next morning, they resumed their journey, the sun rising slowly over the desert horizon. The air was still, heavy with the promise of the coming storm. Elias could feel the change in the atmosphere, as if something was about to break. The hunters were close. Kaela had been silent for most of the morning, her eyes scanning the horizon as they walked. Elias didn't ask her where they were going. He trusted her instincts now, even if he didn't fully understand the world she came from. They reached the edge of a narrow canyon by mid-afternoon, and Kaela paused, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the terrain. "This is it," she said, her voice low. "The VYR stronghold is just beyond this canyon, but it is heavily guarded. We will have to move quickly and quietly." Elias nodded, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of the Clanblade. The air was thick with tension. They could feel the hunters closing in, the sense of danger rising with each step they took. Kaela glanced at him, her eyes sharp. "Are you ready?" she asked. Elias met her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm ready," he said, the words coming out more firmly than he felt. Together, they moved into the canyon, the shadows growing longer as the sun dipped lower in the sky. The air was colder now, the temperature dropping quickly as nightfall approached. Elias felt the weight of the Clanblade once more, its presence a constant reminder of the vow he had taken. There was no turning back now. As they reached the other side of the canyon, Elias could hear the sound of voices up ahead. Kaela motioned for him to stay low, her movements swift and silent. They were close now, so close that Elias could almost feel the presence of the VYR warriors on the other side of the rocks. His pulse quickened. They were about to face their first test, and Elias wasn't sure if he was ready for what came next. But there was no time for doubt now. He had already made his choice, and the Clanblade was his to carry. The moment of truth was here. The sound of voices grew louder as Elias and Kaela moved deeper into the canyon, the tension in the air palpable. Elias could feel his heartbeat in his throat, the Clanblade on his back, now a constant reminder of the vow he had taken, the promise that had bound him to Kaela. He wasn't sure what to expect, but the time for doubts had passed. He had already made his choice. Kaela led the way, her movements silent and swift, her eyes scanning the shadows as they approached the VYR stronghold. They were close now, close enough that Elias could feel the presence of the warriors on the other side of the rocks. His grip tightened around the Clanblade's hilt as he followed Kaela, his senses heightened, every muscle tense, ready for whatever came next. As they neared the entrance, Kaela stopped abruptly, her hand shooting up in a silent command for Elias to halt. He froze, barely able to suppress the urge to breathe louder than the wind. They crouched low, hidden in the shadows as Kaela surveyed the entrance to the stronghold, her eyes narrowed in concentration. Elias watched her, a flicker of admiration rising in his chest. She was a warrior through and through, confident, focused, determined. But there was something else in her eyes too, something that he hadn't noticed before. It was a vulnerability, hidden deep beneath the surface. She wasn't just a warrior fighting for her clan. She was a leader, someone who carried the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. He could see it now. She wasn't just asking for his protection. She was trusting him with her people, with her legacy. "We need to move quickly," Kaela whispered, breaking the silence. Elias nodded, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had sworn to protect her, to fight by her side. But now, in the face of what was to come, he wasn't sure if he was truly ready for it. Kaela moved first, a shadow among shadows, her steps fluid and silent. Elias followed, his footsteps careful but deliberate. They slipped through the rocks, staying low, their eyes constantly scanning for movement. They could hear the murmurs of the VYR warriors now, voices drifting toward them from just beyond the rocks. It wasn't just the sound of the warriors. They could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the battle that was about to unfold. The stronghold was heavily guarded. Kaela had warned him, and Elias had no illusions about the danger they were about to face. This was not just about protecting her. It was about standing with her, side by side, against an entire clan of warriors who wouldn't hesitate to fight to the death to protect their own. They reached the edge of the stronghold's entrance, a narrow opening in the rock that led into the heart of the VYR's hidden base. Kaela signaled for Elias to wait, then slipped through the gap in the rock. Elias followed closely behind, feeling the cold air of the stronghold greet him as they entered the darkened space. The interior was quiet, save for the faint hum of the energy shields that protected the stronghold from outside threats. The stone walls were covered in strange, glowing symbols, a language Elias didn't understand, but felt somehow connected to. It was the language of the VYR, he realized, the same language that had been spoken during their journey, the language of their ancestors, their warriors, their clan. This way, Kaela whispered, her voice barely audible as she led him deeper into the stronghold. They passed through narrow corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Elias could feel the weight of the Clanblade pressing against his back, reminding him that there was no turning back now. They had made their way into the heart of the VYR's stronghold, and the battle that awaited them was inevitable. Kaela led him to a chamber at the far end of the stronghold, a vast room with high ceilings and walls covered in ancient tapestries. At the center of the room was a large stone table, and around it sat a group of VYR warriors, their eyes trained on Kaela as she entered. There was no need for words. They knew her. They knew who she was and what she had done. And now, they knew who Elias was as well. Kaela stepped forward, her posture proud and unyielding, as she addressed the gathered warriors. "I have returned," she said, her voice steady, "and I bring with me a human who has sworn to stand with us." The room fell silent, the tension thick in the air as the VYR warriors regarded Elias with cold, calculating eyes. He could feel the weight of their gaze, the suspicion, the judgment. He was an outsider, a human, standing among them as though he belonged. But Kaela's presence was a shield, and as she stood before them, Elias felt the bond between them solidify. He wasn't just her protector anymore. He was part of this, part of the VYR clan, bound by the Clanblade and the vow he had taken. Kaela turned to him, her gaze softening for a moment before she faced the warriors again. "This human will fight with us," she said firmly, "and he will prove his loyalty through his actions." Elias felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. This was it, the moment that would determine everything. There was no turning back now. They had made their choice. And now, they would fight together, side by side. The VYR warriors were silent, their cold eyes fixed on Elias as Kaela stood at the forefront, unwavering, the weight of her presence like an immovable force in the room. The tension was palpable, thick in the air, as every warrior in the chamber assessed the human who had walked into their sacred stronghold, the one who had bound himself to Kaela by the Clanblade. Elias stood tall, his hands resting on the hilt of the blade, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the eyes of the warriors on him, their judgment, their scrutiny. It was overwhelming. Yet, he didn't flinch. He couldn't. Kaela had placed her trust in him, and that alone was enough to steel his resolve. "You will prove your worth, human," a deep voice spoke from across the room, breaking the silence. Elias turned to face the speaker, a tall VYR warrior whose armor shimmered with the faint glow of ancient symbols. His gaze was sharp, like a blade honed to perfection, as he regarded Elias with open disdain. "You have sworn an oath, but words are nothing. We will see if you are truly worthy of standing among us." Kaela stepped forward, her presence commanding, her eyes locking with the warriors. "He is more than words. He has proven his loyalty, and he will prove his strength." The VYR warrior smirked, clearly unconvinced. "Strength? You bring a human into our midst and expect him to fight like one of us." Elias could feel the heat rising in his chest, the blood pounding in his ears. He didn't come here to argue. He came to fight, to prove himself. But he knew that showing any sign of hesitation now would only seal his fate. He stepped forward, his voice steady, though it was impossible to hide the determination in it. "I may not be VYR, but I am a warrior in my own right. I will prove my strength through action, not words." The room grew quieter at his declaration, the warriors eyeing him with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Kaela's eyes softened, but only for a moment before she turned her attention back to the warriors. "I have already seen his strength," she said, her voice unwavering. "Now it is your turn to see it." Without another word, the VYR warrior who had spoken stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Elias. "We will see if your strength is enough," he said, drawing his weapon, a gleaming spear that hummed with a strange energy. The others in the room stepped back, forming a circle around the two of them, their eyes intense and focused. The challenge had been set. Elias reached for the Clanblade, feeling its weight as his fingers closed around the hilt. It was a weapon forged for a different kind of fight, a different kind of warrior, but in this moment, it was all he had. He was no longer just a man on a rescue mission. He was part of something bigger now, part of Kaela's clan, part of the VYR, and he would prove his worth. The VYR warrior lunged at him, the spear slicing through the air with a speed Elias barely had time to react to. He parried the blow with the Clanblade, the impact reverberating through his arm, but the weight of the spear was immense. The warrior was fast, his movements fluid and precise, but Elias wasn't going to back down. He pushed forward, using the momentum of the spear's strike to twist and bring the Clanblade down in a powerful arc toward the warrior's side. The warrior barely managed to raise his spear in time to block the blow, but the force of the strike sent him stumbling back. Elias didn't give him a chance to recover. He pressed the attack, moving with a speed and precision that surprised even him, the Clanblade slicing through the air with a ferocity he hadn't known he possessed. Each swing felt natural, each step a calculated move, as if the blade was guiding him, showing him the way. The VYR warrior was a skilled fighter, but Elias was relentless. He was fighting for more than just his life. He was fighting for Kaela, for the bond they shared, for the vow that had been placed upon him. The warrior's eyes flashed with surprise, then with respect, as he parried another blow from Elias, the force sending them both crashing to the ground. Elias quickly regained his footing, his breath heavy, his muscles burning, but he didn't hesitate. He was ready to finish what he had started. The VYR warrior stood, wiping the blood from his lip, his eyes no longer filled with disdain, but with something else, recognition. He raised his weapon in acknowledgement. "You have proven your strength, human," he said, his voice low, but filled with respect. Elias, panting heavily, nodded, his grip still tight on the Clanblade. He had done it. He had proven himself. But more than that, he had proven to himself that he was capable of standing with Kaela, of fighting for her clan. The room was silent for a moment, the tension hanging in the air before Kaela spoke, her voice steady and proud. "This is my warrior," she said, her gaze sweeping over the warriors in the room. "And now, you all know what he is capable of." Elias stood tall, his chest heaving, but there was no doubt in his mind now. He had found his place among the VYR, and he would fight to protect them, to honor the vow he had taken. He was no longer just a human on a rescue mission. He was one of them now, bound by honor, by strength, and by the Clanblade that had chosen him. The battle had just begun. The air in the chamber was thick with anticipation, the tension lingering after Elias's hard-won victory. The VYR warriors, who had once regarded him with cold disdain, now watched him with something different in their eyes, respect. He had earned it, though he could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. He wasn't just a human anymore. He was one of them, bound by the Clanblade and the vow that had changed everything. Kaela stood beside him, her expression unreadable, but her presence was unwavering. He could feel the connection between them now, deeper than ever. It wasn't just about protecting her. It wasn't even just about the vow he had made. It was about the future, about standing together as equals, facing whatever challenges lay ahead. "You fought well, human," the tall VYR warrior who had challenged him said, his voice still low but filled with respect. "You have proven yourself, and for that, I will honor the vow that binds you to our clan." Elias nodded, still catching his breath, his body sore from the intensity of the fight. "I didn't fight for honor," he said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion. "I fought because you're my family now, and I protect my family." The warrior seemed to study him for a moment, then gave a short nod. "You will be tested again, but you will not face it alone. We stand together, as warriors, as one clan." Elias turned to Kaela, his eyes meeting hers. There was no doubt in her gaze, only a fierce pride that filled his chest with warmth. This was her world, her people, and he was now part of it, whether he fully understood it yet or not. "What happens now?" Elias asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kaela stepped forward, her eyes never leaving his, a soft smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Now, we prepare," she said, her voice calm but determined. "The VYR may be divided, but we are stronger together. The hunters are not the only threat we face." Elias nodded, understanding that the true battle was just beginning. They had won a small victory here, but the real fight was still ahead. The VYR stronghold, though hidden, was not impervious to outside threats. There were enemies who had been watching, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Elias felt the weight of the Clanblade at his side once more. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol of everything they were fighting for, everything they had yet to protect. Kaela moved toward the center of the room, where the warriors had gathered, her movements graceful and precise. "We have much to prepare for," she said, her voice echoing in the chamber. "The time of peace is over. The hunters will not be the only ones seeking our destruction." The room grew silent as the warriors took their positions, the air now thick with the anticipation of the battles yet to come. Elias followed Kaela, his mind focused on what lay ahead. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just a man on a mission. He was part of something much greater, and he would fight to protect it, to protect her, and to honor the vow that had bound him to her and her people. The sound of armor shifting and weapons being readied filled the room, the quiet hum of anticipation growing with every passing moment. Elias stood tall, his hand resting on the hilt of the Clanblade, feeling its energy pulsing in time with his own heartbeat. The future was uncertain, but he was ready. Kaela turned to face him, her eyes locked on his, her expression fierce and resolute. "Together," she said simply, and Elias knew that no matter what happened next, they would face it as one. Together, they would fight for the VYR, for their people, for the bond that had been forged in the heat of battle, for the future they would build together. The weight of the Clanblade, the weight of his vow, was now a part of him, as much a part of him as the very blood that flowed through his veins. And with that, Elias stepped forward, ready for whatever came next. They were no longer just two individuals caught in a storm. They were warriors, bound by honor, by loyalty, and by a future that was theirs to shape. The days that followed were filled with preparation, the sound of metal being sharpened, armor being repaired, and the quiet murmurs of warriors discussing their strategy. Elias, once a simple human on a rescue mission, now stood shoulder to shoulder with Kaela and her clan, ready to face the trials that lay ahead. He had proven his strength, earned their respect, but there was still much to prove. The VYR warriors had come to see him as one of their own, and though the weight of the Clanblade on his back was a constant reminder of the vow he had taken, Elias knew that the true test was not just about strength, but about loyalty, trust, and survival. The first battle came sooner than expected. The scouts reported movement. Hunters, enemies of the VYR, had gathered in force, seeking to take advantage of the VYR's moment of weakness. Kaela gathered the warriors, her voice calm, yet commanding, her eyes fierce as she surveyed her people. "We fight for our survival," she said. "We fight for our future. Elias will lead the charge with me. He has proven himself. Now, we will prove to them that we will never fall." Elias felt a surge of pride at her words, but there was no time for hesitation. The battle ahead would not be easy. The hunters were well-equipped and vicious, and they had the advantage of numbers. But Elias had something the hunters didn't: Kaela, her warriors, and the unbreakable bond forged by the Clanblade. As they moved toward the battlefield, Elias could feel the weight of the situation pressing on him. There was no going back. This was the moment that would define everything. His hand rested on the hilt of the Clanblade, its energy humming softly beneath his fingertips, a constant reminder of the vow he had made. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something much bigger: his family, his people, and the woman who had trusted him with everything. When they reached the battlefield, the clash was immediate. The hunters had set up their defenses, but they were unprepared for the VYR's attack. Kaela led the charge, her warriors moving in perfect formation, the sounds of battle rising in a roar as the two sides collided. Elias fought beside her, the Clanblade moving with a life of its own, cutting through enemies with precision and power. He had learned quickly, adapting to the rhythm of battle, his body moving in sync with the blade. His strikes were clean, his movements sharp, and every blow was a reminder of the bond he shared with Kaela and her people. As the battle raged on, Elias found himself facing a formidable enemy, a massive hunter, their leader, who wielded a great axe that seemed to glow with the power of the storm. The hunter was a towering figure, moving with a brutal grace that sent shockwaves through the ground with each step. Elias met his gaze, the challenge clear in the other's eyes. Without a word, the two clashed, the sound of metal ringing out as the hunter swung his axe in a wide arc, aiming to cleave Elias in two. Elias dodged just in time, his heart racing as he countered with a powerful swing of the Clanblade. The hunter parried with ease, his strength evident, but Elias was quicker. He pressed the attack, using his agility to stay one step ahead, his blade cutting through the air with deadly accuracy. The hunter growled in frustration, swinging again, but Elias was already moving, his feet light on the ground as he ducked under the strike and landed a hit on the hunter's side. The blow staggered the hunter, but it wasn't enough to bring him down. Elias knew that this battle wasn't just about strength. It was about resolve, about pushing forward even when the odds seemed impossible. With one final strike, Elias found an opening. He drove the Clanblade deep into the hunter's side, the blow precise and lethal. The hunter let out a final, gurgling cry before collapsing to the ground. Elias stood over him, breath heavy, his body sore from the fight, but his heart was steady. He had done it. The VYR were victorious. The hunters had been defeated, their forces scattered. The battlefield was littered with the fallen, both VYR and enemy alike, but the fight had been won. Elias turned to Kaela, his eyes meeting hers across the battlefield. She was covered in blood, her armor battered, but her expression was one of triumph. They had done it. Together. As the remaining warriors regrouped, Kaela approached him, her steps steady despite the chaos around them. "You've earned your place among us," she said, her voice filled with respect. "The Clanblade is yours, not because you bear it, but because you've proven that you are a true warrior." Elias nodded, his gaze locked with hers. "I fight for you," he said simply, "and I will always fight for our people." She smiled, a soft, proud smile that made his chest tighten with emotion. "And I will always fight by your side." The battle was over, but the war was far from won. There would be more challenges ahead, more enemies to face, but Elias knew that with Kaela by his side, with the VYR behind him, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. The bond that had begun with the Clanblade had become something far greater, something that could never be broken. They were warriors, bound by honor, by loyalty, and by the promise of a future they would build together. And together, they would face whatever came next.